Hello and welcome to this week's Talking Africa podcast, where we get behind the news from the continent with correspondents in 40 countries and in-depth analysis of African politics and business. I'm Anne-Marie Besada. The Africa Report covers parts of the continent that other publications cannot reach. For those of you who do not already subscribe, we'd like to offer you a 30% discount, so send us an email to feedback@theafricareport.com on the podcast. Now, this week, we'll be speaking to a certain Zambian businessman and politician who is also the president of the United Party for National Development. But what he really wants to be is president of Zambia. In fact, Hakainde Hichilema has contested 5 times in 2006, 2008, 2011, 2015, and 2016. He's trying again this year, with Zambians going to the polls on August the 12th, despite him being violently arrested in 2017 on what he calls trumped-up charges of treason. His offense, a minor traffic incident not giving way to a presidential motorcade. It illustrates perhaps how strong an opponent the president thinks he is. In this week's podcast with Nicholas Norbrook, Hichilema begins by looking at what kind of guarantees he can get for a free and fair election.
Well, thank you very much, Nicholas, for your time and indeed really for engaging us on this very important matter. I really think that there should be no time where we give up. There ought to be no time where we give up, because giving up is equivalent, if not the same as committing suicide, political, democratic suicide, and handing over the country to autocrats, handing over the country to dictators. So we don't see that situation as the answer to our challenges. Obviously, there are a lot of problems. There are a lot of challenges, as you may have known, from the voter registration. You know, in this country, we need to be a voter, you need to have a national identity document called National Registration Card. So that was skewed, no question about it, deliberately in the perceived UPND stronghold. And then the actual voter registration was manipulated, where, facilities were limited, to regions that were perceived to be opposition. But we are encouraged by the fact that Nicholas, despite the authoritarian way of behaving by the government in office, ranging from arbitrary arrests, extrajudicial detention, threats, violence, all of that stuff, undemocratic process, as I said, registration of bills, such as the cyber bill, which has just been assented to and has become law. All of that is to gag human rights, liberties, and freedoms, including the media freedoms. But also, the voters register, I touched on it, that it was skewed. But the good news, we believe, we see a silver lining, in the sense that the illegality associated with, if you like, doing away of the old register, existing register, which was a legal way, so that you had a build-up of new voters, clean out the old, the dead, sorry, not the old, the dead, and all of that stuff. But that didn't happen, and the illegality happened. They registered voters only for a 30-day period, plus 4 days, which is illegal, because the law says there must be continuous voter registration. All that was meant to disadvantage the opposition. But despite that, we see a silver lining, in the sense that the profile of the new voters, the 7,002,000 voters, 7,002,000 voters, Nicholas, has a larger portion of the youth, the young people, who braved slowness of the Electoral Commission registration process, braved the nights to register as voters. We believe they didn't do that to keep the party in office continuing. They did that for change. Definitely the message of change is written on the walls. And therefore, we believe that we are winning the election. The surveys that have been conducted shows that people want change. People want a new team there. And obviously, on the basis of that, giving up will be suicidal. And we therefore are intending to continue, pushing for fairness, to have a free, fair, credible election on the 12th of August, Nicholas, and also to be able to protect our vote, which is the party agents you're talking about, polling agents, 2 of them in the polling station. And hopefully we can fend off and not even encourage violence, because that's another issue. It's not just being present in a polling station, but also the violence that is orchestrated by the thugs, the party thugs that are now armed with guns, real guns, not fake guns. But in order to deal with that, so it's not enough to have party agents, our party agents, we also want to make sure that international observers are there. We want to make sure that local civil society, Nicholas, have agents also who are called monitors. 100%, we want to see 100% coverage. All the around 14,000 polling stations should have our agents, should have monitors, local monitors, and if anything, the international community, the bilateral partners should be able to assist in supporting the church, the civil society, upright church, upright civil society, with monitors in all the polling stations. And then obviously we have other measures we're considering to be able to fend off, is the point I wanted to make, Nicholas, the violence that is likely to come with the election on the 12th of August, because that's the way the environment is primed by the PM to bring about violence. So we're working on all of those fronts so we can have a chance given to the opportunity, the people of Zambia, to have a leadership that will basically deliver a better life for them. Thank you.
Do you have, when it comes to those kind of violent practices, do you have any support from Sadc, any support from other regional players on electoral abuses?
Not at all, unfortunately. Other than 1 or 2 lone voices that may come out of Sadc heads of state, 1 or 2 courageous ones, as an institution, as an organ, Sadc is weak. It's unfortunate to say that, but that's the truth. It's much, much weaker now than even 5-6 years ago, because there's a tendency by those parties in office to sustain each other. Scratch my back, I scratch yours when your election comes. Or indeed just turn a blind eye what is happening in the neighboring country or countries on the pretext, Nicholas, that will constitute as non-interference to internal matters, right? But that does not make sense. If all of us in this region took that approach, we would have never supported the anti-apartheid movement. As you know, that Zambia was a headquarters for the ANC, freedom fighters, under the apartheid regime. After the headquarters moved from Tanzania, it came into Zambia. And we bore the brunt of the liberation struggles in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia then, southern Rhodesia, in Mozambique, in Angola, in South Africa. But the tendency by the heads, our leaders, political leaders in the region in Sadc, it really, really leaves much to be desired. They are uninvolved, they are symbolically engaged only. Sadc is much weaker than ECOWAS. ECOWAS, as you know, Nicholas is doing a much better job, although they're challenged, than Sadc. So the answer is largely no. So unfortunately, no.
When it comes to just on Sadc then, how likely is it, for example, that Sadc will intervene in northern Mozambique and convince Maputo that a regional Sadc force is required? Do you expect that, or do you think they're too weak?
Well, I think they are too weak at the moment, really, to be honest. The natural leadership of Sadc, irrespective of who is the chairman of Sadc, it's rotational. To be chairman of Sadc, a head of state this year, maybe a country, Congo DR, following year to move to another country. I think they have a roster, how it moves. South Africa is a natural leader. South Africa is the one that really ought to provide leadership even when it's not officially the chair of Sadc. As I think a club of nations, a group of nations do in ECOWAS, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, to some extent, Ivory Coast. I think we are lacking that in the Sadc region. So it is very unlikely that they may have an organized way of responding to the threat in Mozambique. What happened to Palma in the Palma town region a few days ago, where even South African contractors were killed and a lot of local people were killed at a hotel elsewhere, is unacceptable. And it means that the trouble in Mozambique is now going to grow into our countries. Zambia shares a border with Mozambique, Zimbabwe, South Africa itself, Tanzania. It would have been natural for these countries to move in quickly and engage the Mozambican government on how to fight these extremists who are now borderless, Nicholas. They don't respect any borders. And this is a threat to development of our individual economies in the region, to our regional economy, because insecurity, obviously, what's happening will frighten investors. Investments, capital is a coward in a way. And so I'm concerned about this, very concerned, especially that we also, in our own country, Nicholas, the party in office is arming party cadres who are evolving into thuggery. They are now creating a platform that could easily invite the extremists in Mozambique to find partners, to find friends in the name of the ruling party thugs who are armed in this country. Very worrying. But Sadc must rise. We expect Sadc to rise to the occasion and take the early steps, because this is a member state. Mozambique is a member state. Instead of waiting for AU, instead of waiting for the UN, Sadc must move in.
How close, how do you feel the economic hardship currently afflicting Zambia will affect Lungu's electoral standing?
Well, the economy has collapsed, Nicholas, no question about it. We knew it was going to collapse. We talked about it. We warned about it in 2013, 2014, into the 2015 presidential election and 2016. And I think now the chickens have come home to roost. It's no longer a debate whether the country's economy is declining. It is a fact. It's written on the walls. You see it in unemployment, high levels of unemployment, falling standards, including inclusiveness, inclusion in education. You see it in the collapse in the health services, delivery sector, where we're even buying expired medicines, drugs. I'm sure you heard the scandal on Honeybee, where they bought expired drugs. Corruption is just the order of the day. We've never seen such levels of corruption, unprecedented. And it eats away the little resources that ought to be available for productive sectors, agriculture, financial services, value addition. It's not there. And obviously the hunger now, pronounced. Many homes go to bed without decent food, decent meals. This is a problem, Nicholas. It's now common knowledge that before, it's only a few of us who are talking about the decline in the economy. And remember, there's an argument being used to say that the decline is because of COVID-19. But the truth is that the PF inherited an economy growing at 6+% in 2011. By December 2019, Nicholas, they worked this growth down to 1.9%. There was no COVID then. COVID arrived on our borders in early part of 2020. So the argument being used that the economy has collapsed because of COVID is not true. COVID found a collapsed economy due to poor leadership of the PF, no question about it. So yes, there ought to be an effect on voters. Yes, the voters are pushing for change. And very clear, our assessments show that the majority of the people of Zambia, over 60%, want change away from the current government. And they know that the current government has failed economically, socially. I mean, to give you an example, council workers, local government workers, I don't know how you call them in your area, but here is council workers, local authority workers. Many of them, yesterday I was on radio in a region in Eastern Province, and you have councils that have not paid salaries for 7 months. Workers have not been paid. Very low salaries, but they've not paid salary. This is a collapse, this is a degradation. A huge amount of our revenue, domestic revenue, goes to debt service. You know we've defaulted already. You are aware, Nicholas, we have defaulted on the Eurobond. So people want change. What is the challenge is to deliver a free, fair election. That's a challenge. And the issue of violence we've talked about already those are the threats to a change of government. And vote protection, obviously, the cyber security bill is meant to cut. Even us doing a PVT, para voter tabulation, is being challenged now as the media is being challenged. The remaining media space is social media, internet-based. They're shutting it down. And we fear that there could be a total shutdown of internet towards the election, on the election day, and post-election day. That's our concern.
How has the arrival of a new team in Washington affected your calculus? Have you been reaching out? There were some interesting effects immediately visible in Ethiopia when Senator Chris Coons traveled to Ethiopia, and Prime Minister Abiy initially didn't even want to see him until it was pointed out that it would be a very good idea given Chris Coons' relationship with Joe Biden, who's obviously president. Have you had any joy in reaching out to US officials? Do you believe they will assist in providing some level of scrutiny?
First and foremost, we really welcome the change in Washington and DC and the Capitol. The departure of Donald Trump is a welcome move to us. Certainly, not just to Zambia, I think to Africa, because the inward-looking approach that Donald Trump took to global issues really was puzzling to many of us. How can the global leader just turn their back on the rest of the world? How do they justify their global leadership? More importantly, how does the leader of the free world, the democratic free world, turn their back on fragile young democracies in Africa? I think that was unpleasing, to use polite language. So the coming in of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, they pronounce her, her name, is really a welcome move. We keenly followed those elections, and we are pleased with the outcomes. The American people made a decision that pleased many of us on this continent. And I believe elsewhere, especially those of us who share the culture, the values of democratic nations, good governance, rule of law, human rights, liberties and freedoms, media freedoms, and indeed many others. So it was a breath of fresh air. So we congratulated that government through the channels, diplomatic channels here, but we are yet to see, and we are keen to see, President Biden, as he has returned to the climate summit, very pleasing, as he is returning to NATO, to his NATO partners. We would like to see the new US government beginning to pay attention to Africa. Africa's democratic credentials are going down. We have an increasing number of autocrats taking over our countries, and indeed, this is not good for economic growth, for investment, for job creation, much needed jobs, especially for the youth, the women. And so we expect this engagement to come through. We expect early involvement. The reason there's an increase, Nicholas, we believe, in autocratic ways in African government is because the African governments who do not respect the rule of law, who are oppressive, who are basically, shutting media houses, do not think that their sanctions that there are consequences for bad behavior, for inhuman behavior, undemocratic behavior, for corruption, enriching themselves at the expense of citizens. There appears to be no sanction, again driven by Trump's absence from the leadership scene. And I think it's important, obviously, with Brexit, what happened to Brexit, the British traditionally work closer to us, former British colonies, as the French work close with the former French colonies in Africa. But Brexit also created an issue for us where Britain started to look inward more and more and not paying too much attention to Africa. And indeed, I think Asian countries. Look at what's happening in Vietnam. No. To Myanmar. Look at what's going on to Myanmar. It doesn't give a good example to the small autocrats that are developing in Africa. If Myanmar can be allowed to degenerate, to degrade to the levels of rivers of blood as we see it, it's emboldening dictators in this country, on this continent. And that's not good. I think the Biden team, the European Union, and others, who believe in a free world, free will, and good governance, must engage must raise their engagement with Africa, including making sure that elections are supported to be free and fair. Thank
you. How close is Lungu to Mnangagwa? Is there some kind of mutual protection going on?
I wouldn't put my finger onto that, Nicholas. I wouldn't put my finger because the Zimbabwe situation, has affected many of the countries in the region with migration. South Africa is hit most because South Africa has a lot more to offer to migrants, to refugees than Zambia. But that there's a historical tie between Zambia and Zimbabwe. During the liberation struggle, again, most liberation fighters were housed in Zambia, in Mozambique, I must say in Malawi, but mostly in Zambia because of the closeness, long border we share, and also the common bloodlines between Zimbabweans and Zambians. So we did grow those relationships. I went to my undergraduate studies sitting in the same lecture rooms with the Zimbabwean freedom fighters in my class, with remnants of those even after independence of Zimbabwe, and of course the ANC veterans. Then they were just freedom fighters. So naturally, there is an unrecorded influx of Zimbabweans coming into Zambia. Unrecorded, many, because their families across the Zambezi River, many. And this is something that is not talked about a lot. So we're feeling the pinch. We can see the influx of our relatives coming across from that side. And I suspect governments who are neighbors will be talking to each other. But really, I can't put a finger to it to say, yes, there's collusion, there's collaboration. But the explosion, trouble in Zimbabwe is affecting all of us, including South Africa. That's why Sadc must work, Nicholas. That's why there's need to engage among Sadc leaders, because you cannot be indifferent to what's happening in Zambia and Zimbabwe if you are South Africa, if you are Malawi, if you are Mozambique. So that's the issue. But what we see is bad habits emerging, especially oppression, killings, state-sponsored killings, abductions, as it is now. And Sadc is silent. We've written to Sadc ourselves. Sadc is silent. So we're concerned about this silence, then the Trump silence before, and that's why we're hoping that there'll be a new order. Thank you.
It appears that they share an arms supplier, the Belarusian Zingman. Do you know anything about him?
Not much. I've read about him. I understand that there are issues around what you mentioned, but I don't know much about him. I've read about him, and what Zimbabwe needs is not arms. What we need is investment. What we need is debt management. What we need is jobs, economy, food for our people. And anyone who is busy supplying arms to Zimbabwe or Zambia or Malawi is not really welcome. We don't need arms. What we need is our economies to generate jobs, to generate business opportunities, to generate food, to grow more food, affordable food for our people. So really, that Zygmunt story, to me, doesn't sit well, because we don't need that help. We need help to create opportunities for our people, especially young people, the youth.
Have you noticed an increased criminal role of Israeli businesses and arms dealers in Zambia?
I wouldn't really be definitive about it, Nicholas, I'm afraid. But in general, I've answered the question to say, we don't need arms dealers here.
Yeah.
What we need are dealers in making investment capital available. But investment capital will not become available, Nicholas, as I said, that capital is a coward. We ourselves, as citizens of Zambia, Zimbabwe, must bring in leaders that are clearly visionary, leaders that will pro-growth, pro-investment, therefore pro-jobs, pro-health, pro-education policies, which will promote investment, stable investment climate, attractive investment climate, stable investment climate, and obviously, prudence, because there's so much wastage. When we do that, then we can, and we should promote peddlers of investment, those who bring investments in energy, so that we can have the basic need, the fundamental need to prop up an industry is energy. When you have electricity shortages, energy shortages, it's not good for our regions, our countries. So it is very important that we do our homework as Africans, as Zambians and Zimbabweans, to drive change, to bring in visionary, capable, corrupt-free leaderships. And that's who we are. That's why we're seeking public office. Clear intent to serve the people, to serve them better, not to accumulate debt and sustainable debt as we have done in our country. So dismantle the debt mountain, make the conditions attractive for investment, create jobs, create business opportunities. Then we can talk about partnering with anyone else in the world who can help us in this agenda to uplift the living standards of our people. Thank you.
You talked about the prudence and wastage. Will you be campaigning on the cost of Lungu's presidential jet, which has missile launches, as I understand it, and might not be a priority for the country?
Not a priority for us at all. No Zambian is benefiting from that Gulf Stream. Nicholas, it's an embarrassment for one calling themselves the president of Zambia at this time, when the economy has declined, when there are no jobs, when there's no oxygen in hospitals. And some coronavirus patients can be saved by being put on oxygen machines. There's no oxygen. Why would anyone justify having a Gulf Stream, which was bought at $130 million, overpriced? I think the normal cost should be $60 million. We paid, taxpayers paid $130 million, plus a maintenance cost for the current period of $200 million. Can you imagine? $130 million of a Gulf Stream maintenance contract, $200 million, $330 million. We can put oxygen plants in every province. We can send children to school. We can support agriculture. We can support entrepreneurship, interventions that will put our people on the road to dignity, to self-employment, to being suppliers as small, medium enterprises into larger businesses and have, if you like, a new income. It's actually not even, it's not something I can blink about. We don't need that plane. We will not need it. We've said it already publicly. There's been some debate around it anyway. Someone has said, no, you can't sell a military plane. How was that military plane bought? Whose money was used? Taxpayers' money. Who go to bed without food? So, yes, the overall prudence subject, expenditure control, Nicholas, luxuries, unnecessary expenditure, we will be campaigning on suppressing those. And the savings so realize will go in revenue generation in various sectors, as I said, health, agriculture, education, energy, financial services, right? Financial services infrastructure, deepening that mobile, opportunities. This cyber bill takes away one of our competitive advantages to revive our economies, which is the electronic, if you like, internet edge, technology, internet, to deliver health services, to deliver agriculture services, to deliver financial services, mobile money, for example. All of those are threatened by this selfish bill, which is only meant, nothing to do with cybersecurity. Everything has to do with it sustaining themselves in political office. Nothing to do with cybersecurity, because we have enough laws to punish those that are abusing the cyberspace. But this bill is meant to kill our platform, competitive platform, to deliver cheaper, quicker services, various services, including social services, to our people. But we are campaigning, Nicholas, also on the basis that we are going to repeal this law. It's now a law because the bill was signed a few days ago by this guy, this colleague of ours in office. So prudence, yes. Governance, good governance, oversight institutions, Anti-Corruption Commission, Drug Enforcement Commission, Financial Intelligence Center, Auditor General's office. We want to convert them to officers of parliament, give them the freedom, financial, operational. And that's important to manage our policy on zero tolerance on corruption. Very, very important, Nicholas. So we will be campaigning on all of those areas that wastage is not what we want. The debt mountain is unsustainable. We must live within our means as much as possible. Yes, we need support, we need cooperation, but charity begins at home. And the IMF program is very important to send a signal that we are serious to do business, as UPN did when we take office, God's will, courtesy of the people of Zambia, after the 12th of August. That's how we are moving going forward. Very clear intent and how to get to what we intend to do. Very, very clear. Thank you.
Have you met with President Ramaphosa of South Africa? And if so, has he given you support?
We haven't met yet. We would like to get more support from President Cyril Ramaphosa. As I have said, South Africa is the natural leader, all-time leader of the Sadc region because of the size of the economy, the advancement of this economy, that economy, and indeed, the history of that country. Because it was liberated, yes, by the ANC freedom fighters, but a lot of huge costs were incurred by Zambia, Mozambique, Angola, Tanzania, Botswana, Zimbabwe itself, and Malawi. So I think the history of the liberation struggle in South Africa should assist presidents of South Africa, including President Cyril Ramaphosa, to pay attention to what is obtaining in other countries. Democratic space, when it's eroded, he knows that the next thing will be autocracy, the next thing will be migration and refugees. Then you will have xenophobia, something that should really not happen in South Africa, given that South Africans, a good number of them were living out in our countries here, and they were accommodated. I think that history must not be forgotten, and therefore leadership must come from South Africa. Yes, we would like to engage with President Ramaphosa. He seems to be, at the moment, no criticism to him, to be a little bit consumed by the internal politics of the ANC, right? The factionalism in there, the Zupta issues in there, and they are lingering on. I'm sure you followed what has happened in the last few days, where the National Executive Committee, and I follow the politics there as I do in America, as I do in the UK, as I do in Europe a lot. I mean, what Angela Merkel has been doing, great work there, how migration has affected Angela Merkel's political party there, how they are viewed by the German citizens who think Angela Merkel is opening Germany a lot to the immigrants. But all of that arises from, we don't have to be scientists, rocket scientists to know that if there's instability in one country, there's instability everywhere, because it's a borderless world today. Look at the coronavirus. You cannot control coronavirus in London, in Frankfurt, in Brussels, in Washington, and think that you've controlled the pandemic. The pandemic will ravage us continuously until we have attended to the vaccines globally, making vaccines available. I'm digressing a bit, making vaccines available. As you know, Cyril Ramaphosa and David Mabuza, his vice president and the health minister, basically were in Eastern Cape a few days ago, inspecting a Johnson & Johnson manufacturing facility for the basically, if you like, the coronavirus, if you like, vaccine. And it's important, not only for South Africa, it's important for Africa, it's important for the world. So it goes without saying, really, that we need to engage. South Africa needs to engage. Its history lends itself to that. And it is a reverse order now. There was a time we were looking after South Africans. They should now take care of other African countries. They are better doing that by making African countries stable, by making sure that there's democracy, there's rule of law, so that instability is not orchestrated from that autocratic way of running the countries, which will create economic and social pressures everywhere in the region. And eventually they bought people. Land in Greece, they land in Spain, they land everywhere, including in your shores, on your shores. So I think South Africa can do more, should do more. Indeed, they're not doing enough, but they must invest time, Nicholas, to look at what's happening in their own region, because it's bringing refugees there. I mean, social issues arise there. And South Africans may be good people, but I think they're getting fed up of refugees. But leaders of South Africa must know how to contain those refugees. It's good for them. Even to invest, how do you grow the South African economy? If you have extra investable capital, it must come to Zambia in partnership with Zambian investors and Zambian community. You must go to Mozambique. Look at the gas situation in Mozambique. Look at the guys who were killed, the contractors from South Africa. Instability in the Palma region there, because of the gas find, is affecting directly everybody, including South Africans being killed. So how can the leader of Sadc not have 1% of their time, 2% of their time to attend to regional matters? They ought to. I think they must be encouraged. No criticism to him, because I think he needs to survive. He needs to stabilize the ANC. But the stability of ANC, stability of the South African government is important to stability in the region, and vice versa. Thank you.
Just staying on South Africa, do you still have support from South African corporates like Anglo American and De Beers?
Nicholas, that question is deadly to us, right? To answer it careless is a deadly issue to us, because here we are being accused of being pro-imperialist as a party, because we believe in good governance, we believe in the rule of law, we believe in human rights, liberties, and freedom, we believe in a free media, self-regulating media. We truly believe in those values. And because those values are associated with a free world, democratic world, we are accused of being stooges of imperialists. We're not. We're not stooges of any of the companies you are mentioning. But we are, if you like, stooges of investment. Our own investment, Zambian investors, in order to grow this economy, which has been dilapidated, which has been destroyed by the peer, we need investment. In order to offer jobs, to create jobs, we need investments. Not small doses, big doses. And the investments must be encouraged among Zambians. Investments must be encouraged among investors in the region, South Africa included. Companies come in here. And that's the only way, Nicholas. I'm a strong believer myself, and I push this, share this in our party, United Party for National Development, that we want to revive the economies. That's our main agenda for seeking public office. Because when we grow our economies through investment, through an attractive environment, stable environment, fiscal environment that is stable in the mining sector, not expropriation we see today under the PF. KCM is an example. Mopani is another. A deal that was done badly, which is going to lead to another $1.5 billion of additional debt to the Zambian balance sheet. That's not the way to do deals. But because we make those arguments that those are negative deals, we are perceived that we may be surrogates of investment. We are not. We ourselves want investment, because without growth, you can't look after the sick. You can't look after the weak. You can't look after the orphans. Nicholas, I have no shame to say we Africans must learn something, and learn that fast, and keep it in our minds and heads and thought and soul. You can't share poverty. You cannot redistribute poverty. You can only help the weak and the old and the sick and the young and the less privileged by being successful at the economy, at the investment. Then you can create jobs. Then you can support health services, deliver quality health services. And the story goes on. So we are, in that sense, said to be beneficiaries, even when we are not beneficiaries of those companies that you mentioned. But obviously, those companies understand that as investments, if there's instability, there's poor leadership, no visionary leadership, there is changes in the tax regime in sectors such as mining, which is a long-term investment area, you cannot really invest. So we want to open investments. The doors for investment will be open under the UPND government straight on from day one by starting ourselves to save resources from wastage, to be not corrupt, stealing from the poor, stealing from the taxpayers, to be able to respect the rule of law. There's no investment that will come when there's violence all over, the breakdown of the rule of law. Courts don't work. Courts don't make decisions quickly. Justice delayed is justice denied. So I hope you've seen the alignment that is being made. We would like to receive the support of the free world with whom we share values. We do not subscribe to oppression, to autocratic ways of running a country, because it's unproductive, it's unsustainable. Absolutely not sustainable. Thank you.
Zambia, according to various banking and official sources, is very far from securing a bailout deal from the IMF. What do you hear?
No, well, you can't have an IMF program under the current macro environment. High inflation, unstable exchange rates, high interest rates. So the fiscal policies themselves currently aren't a decent program like IMF. Monetary policy itself. These two must be in tandem. Monetary and fiscal policy must be in tandem. When you have a situation, Nicholas, where the economy is going down, but the streets are awash with cash. I don't know if you're aware of what's happening in this country, where party cadres, ruling party cadres, use cash as mattresses, as pillows. Where are they getting this cash? So there's a fear that there's printing of money going on. Money which is awash by people who have never done business, other than being members of a political elite. People who have no track record of selling anything, generating revenue streams. They've never done that. But they are buying helicopters. A minister who may have run a small lodge before they became ministers, now is able to say and stand up and say they are businessmen, they've been able to buy a helicopter. That's smelling corruption. See, the treasury is empty, Nicholas. Individual elite members of the PF are awash with cash, building mansions. Only they, buying expensive cars, Rolls Royce, Jaguars, helicopters. What does that tell anybody with sensible common sense? It's corruption. Treasury is empty. Political elites are awash with cash. The economy is going down. Even with a huge debt, you would expect that from my profession, finance, double entry works. If you have borrowed money, Nicholas, you should see some growth. But the money, the debt mountain has gone up, the economy is collapsing. Where has the money gone? Are we not sitting with a Mozambique situation here where money is borrowed, it doesn't come into Zambia as it didn't go into Mozambique on certain transactions? Are we not sitting on that? Those are good questions to ask. And growth is plummeting, expected to be minus this year. How can the IMF program come in, Nicholas, with lavish expenditure? We've already talked about the plane, presidential plane. With the most expensive cars in this country, Nicholas, are driven by ministers, not by businessmen. It should be the other way around. So there's corruption, there's poor fiscal policy, there's poor, investment environment, there's expropriation going on. KCM is an expropriation. Mopani is a mimicked transaction. I think the Mopani shareholders are smiling. They're laughing. How they could easily get a deal like that, right? I have nothing against the Mopani colleagues, the shareholders. But what happened to the Zambian government? What about their fiduciary responsibility? They owe it to the people of Zambia, not to add more debt. The solution was a private sector one. It wasn't for the Zambian government to buy shares in Mopani, more than what they had already. If Mopani was already challenged, it was not meeting its operating costs, why would the government go and spend 1.5 billion plus other aspects of the transaction? The term sheet there includes, Nicholas, that Mopani shareholders or connected parties will be involved in the metal trading and have a preemptive right on the cash flows to recover what they are owed. Smart shareholders in Mopani. But what about the country? Who looks after it? Who looks after the interest of the 18 million Zambians? There was nobody. So you can't blame Mopani shareholders, Glencore and others. No, they got a good deal. Somebody was sleeping on duty. It's the Zambian government. So how can you have an IMF program? The IMF program will come after the new government comes in, Nicholas, the UPND government, with our approach, our vision, our policies, our prudence, our anti-corruption commission, zero tolerance commission, governance issues, promoting, liberating, freeing the agencies that look at corruption oversight and separation of powers, parliament, which is the legislature, the executive, the judiciary. Then we will not go to the IMF and say, we are begging for a program. The IMF will find worthy partners in us, including the current lenders who will come to the table. They will come to the table when we take office. They will be treated equitably. We will not entertain cross-subsidization of the debt portfolio. To ask for a haircut from one group of creditors, for example, Eurobond holders, in order to pass that discount to another lender who shall remain nameless on this discussion. That is not the way we want to treat the dismantling of the debt. But we will be upfront, professional, with integrity. We have a background, we have a track record.
We have figures suggesting total public debt might be as high as 166% of GDP. Others estimate it as 145%. What figures do you have?
Well, look, we've always been talking about, and many people in the ruling party argued, we're talking about 20 billion plus, $21 billion. Even that figure was being argued against, right? Yeah. That we were not telling the truth. We really believe that the debt we have is huge, it's unsustainable. We understand others are putting it over $25 billion. Doesn't matter which is the exact figure. It does matter in terms of full disclosure, so you can dismantle that mountain, but it tells you the mess in which we are. We're in a mess. And we need to deal with that situation quickly. You cannot ask the PF, the party in office now, to dismantle that debt, to reconstruct its economy. You can't ask, to use an example, a debtor who comes to you and borrows money and fails to pay, and tomorrow they come to you and say, look, give me more money, I'll pay back. You don't throw good money after bad. So there's no way the current government can bring us out of this debt mountain, bring us out of the economic quagmire. It only takes a new government of the UPND. It's us. Yeah.
Fantastic. And just to be clear, are you suggesting that there has been a Martin bond secret loan as there was in Mozambique, in Zambia?
We believe, Nicholas, that if all the money that is attributable to the debt mountain we have now, which the PF were arguing against, we started talking about this debt mountain way back in 2013, 2014. Nobody listened. Nobody listened in the government. Now the chickens have come home to roost. If that money had been borrowed at the right price, term sheet, conditions, and it was brought into this country, invested in this country, in appropriate investment, not in consumption, but in revenue generating, you'd be seeing the benefits of that money working in this economy. We don't see it. So what's the conclusion? One, the money was wasted in terms of its usage. It was consumed instead of investment expenditure. It was on consumption expenditure. Or the money didn't even come into this country. It was booked on our national balance sheet as a debt. Not all of it came here. That's our concern. That is our concern. And clearly, what other explanation would one give, Nicholas? Why would you have such a huge debt mountain only in a short period of time after the HIPIC qualification, HIPIC completion point, which the late President Mwanawasa worked so hard to achieve, and got our debt portfolio to less than $2 billion? How can we be where we are today without a compensating economic benefits? It only means that money found its way, walked not from the lenders' bank accounts into Zambia, but at least part of it from the lenders' accounts elsewhere, not in Zambia. That's a fact.
Our thanks there to Hakainde Hichilema, and thank you for listening. Don't forget to claim your 30% discount to the Africa Report. Send us an email at feedback@theafricareport.com. You can always catch our previous episodes and all our features online at theafricareport.com. Now, if you enjoyed today's podcast, do rate and review us on your favorite platform. It helps others find us online. For the Africa Report, this is Anne-Marie Bissada. Thanks for listening.